Welcome to video number 1 in the module 217, Ethics of Abuse and Neglect. This video will tell you about the course expectations and give you an initial case and conversation for discussion. So in order to pass this course, you'll need to do two main things. There's a quiz, and it's worth 50% of your module score. An important and unusual thing about this course is that you must score 80% or better on it. And there are only 10 questions, so that means scoring 8 out of 10. There aren't any bonus questions. If you do not pass the quiz, I'll ask you to write an essay as a make-up assignment. So the secret of this module is to make sure that you study and have a really high clarity level on the material before you tackle the quiz. You'll also be given 50% for your participation and completeness in a journal and discussions. At various points in the videos, you'll be asked to pause and write down your thoughts. And I want to see that evidence of those thoughts later on submitted in your journal. So please type your journal and submit it to me later on at the end of the course as an attachment, a PDF or doc file that you submit to me by email. And you also should be prepared to do this, to have thought about these things in a timely way, so that if I ask you to make comment on Facebook or to participate in a teleconference or other discussion, you can do that. In order to be successful in this module, I have to advise you that skipping ahead will really cause you an issue. There really isn't any optional content here. Make sure you watch all the videos, complete all the readings, and do the Googling and internet links that I tell you to do. Because the material in this module is fairly brief, but everything we're about to talk about is truly life or death for the people we will support. It's very important that you study it and understand it. If you have questions or confusion, make sure you check it with me before you tackle the quiz. What we're about to talk about in this module involves a lot of written stuff. Policies, procedures, laws, and definitions, and those things are all important, but my experience is that students can sometimes leave the course with a clear understanding of those things and still not do the right thing when they need to. None of those things matter if you don't really seriously understand, the need and the willingness to apply them. Abuse and neglect occur rarely. You may go thousands of days in your career and never experience a situation where you think these skills or this knowledge is valuable. But on that one time that you do, you'll need to really be mentally and emotionally prepared. There are a lot of sort of mental traps or defense mechanisms that we use to talk ourselves out of doing the right thing. Sometimes they come from in our own head, the stories we tell ourselves, and sometimes they come from other people who try to talk us out of action. I'd like you to pause the video and do your very first journal entry. Think about 2 or 3 things that you might imagine people say that will make you less confident that you should act. Pause the video and come back and I'll give you some ideas. Okay, hopefully you have done some answers. Perhaps some of the things that you thought about were things like not really being able to accept the reality you are experiencing. And that's a very common one because typically people who are abusive hide it, and they may seem very nice to us or very normal to us until we come across some evidence that something else is happening. You might have been concerned about your professional career or the professional career and reputation of other people if you report. And that's a very common thing that people worry about. I should let you know right now that when you report abuse and neglect, both you and the person you're reporting about will have their confidentiality protected, especially if you follow the steps that you'll learn in this module. You may be told by other people that they have reported something in the past and that nothing has happened, and so they may talk you out of it. But it's important to understand what really happens when abuse or neglect are investigated. The military doesn't go in and abduct children when you have a report of abuse or neglect. Instead, what happens is usually a social worker intervenes. And typically what they do is they investigate, or perhaps a better word, assess what's going on. It doesn't mean that they don't believe you if you don't see some kind of dramatic action. Again, they're going to protect the confidentiality of that family. But what they will likely do is take some incremental steps. For example, they might give the parents some guidelines or parenting advice. They might connect them with resources or try to address underlying family issues such as drug and alcohol abuse. And unless they hear from you a second or third time, they may go about their business thinking that things have been resolved. So the idea that something was reported and nothing happened as a reason not to report again is exactly the opposite of why you should report a second or third or even fourth time if you're still seeing issues. You may even be talked out of this by superiors who worry about the reputation of the agency or the amount of paperwork that's involved. In those instances, it's important to understand that the law does not absolve you of your fiduciary or legal responsibility, even if you have been ordered not to act. In fact, even if you're concerned about your own job security, you still have to do this. Another thing that sometimes people say they worry about or that talks them out of it is that they realize they may not be able to work with that person again, that supported individual or that coworker, if they make a report. But think about that for a moment. Our first priority is the wellness and the safety of the people we are there to support. We go into the job recognizing that they are vulnerable. They have to be our first priority, even if we think it might cost us our job, or even if it means that we have to terminate that therapeutic relationship. Realistically, I have seen those types of scenarios, but at the end of the day, we have to accept that our job is to do the right thing, especially when it's tough, because these things will only be important on the toughest days of your career. Let's complete this particular video by giving you a case. This is a real life case. The only thing that's different in it is the name of the child. I'm going to ask you to think about this case in some questions at the end of the video. And again, I'd like you to journal them and be prepared to discuss them. So this is a little boy named Elliot. Elliot was 4 years old, but he still didn't speak. And it wasn't immediately clear, I should point out, that Elliot had some kind of developmental disability that would indicate why he didn't speak. He still wears a diaper, and in fact, that diaper is almost always still dirty and has gone for quite some time without being changed. Elliot cries a lot. He cries a lot more than children his own age. And Elliot's got some older siblings. Those older siblings are healthy from what you can tell, but they're also very underweight. And they're always really dirty, both their body and their clothing. Now, there were other little signals with Elliot, but I'll leave it at that. I'd like you to answer these questions, write them down, and be prepared to talk about them. Does this scenario cause you to suspect abuse or neglect? Why? And by why, I mean, what specific things in the scenario indicate to you that this could be abuse, or maybe why it isn't in your mind? What might you do if you observed this situation? And if you really want to be advanced, think about whether what you might do would be different if you were a worker with Elliot or whether you were just somebody who knew him personally, such as a neighbor. Then in a more broad way, I'd like you to answer these 3 questions, and hopefully they have been inspired by looking at Elliot's scenario. In your own words, what do we mean by abuse? Don't look it up in the dictionary. I don't want that at this point. Similarly, I don't want you to look up the answer to question 4. I want your own interpretation. What kinds of abuse exist in your mind? And number 5, how can we tell the difference between acceptable practices by parents or teachers and abuse? Where is the line between those two things? So that wraps up this video. Take a few moments and put your thoughts down and be prepared to talk about them. Bring your typed thoughts or written thoughts to our next discussion.